And we are live. So, welcome everyone who is tuning in to this live broadcast with some amazing past and future candidates running for, who have and are running for office here in Tennessee. My name is Kate Craig, and I'm one of the candidates running to be the next TNDP Chair. And with me today is Glenn Scruggs, who ran for Tennessee Senate in District 10, Carol Abney, whose former candidate ran in Tennessee House District 38, and Jordan Huffman, who is considering a run in the future. So thank you, everyone, for joining. And this is a hugely important discussion to be having, because what the number one goal of the Tennessee Democratic Party is to get Democrats elected. And it's a conversation that all of the chair candidates are having, all the county parties are having, all the past candidates that have run, everybody that ran is looking to run in the future. All of these discussions that we're having on how do we do this, how do we get out of the superminority, how do we flip the governor's seat, and so what do we do? And so I want to talk just real briefly, and then I'm going to let the candidates all introduce themselves. But one of the things that I've emphasized is that we need to have a rural strategy. And for everybody that tuned into my last live stream heard me say that a rural strategy is not at the expense of an urban strategy or at the suburban strategy. It's a yes and. It's a yes in urban and rural strategy, yes and with an urban, suburban, and rural strategy. So we can't win a statewide race without having a rural strategy. We can't win in a lot of these districts without having a rural strategy. So I just want to play a real quick clip from the Tennessee Hollers forum where this question came up. Question that's asked, and people ask me that a lot as I've talked about this 95 county strategy, because how can we continue to target seats which tend to be in our urban and suburban centers so that we can get out of the super minority in the Tennessee legislature while having a rural strategy? And what does that mean? And my answer is always, if we want to elect a Democratic governor in 2022 and a Democratic senator in 2024, then we have to turn out the vote in our rural communities. Why? Because turning out the vote in our rural communities further amplifies the vote from our Democratic strongholds. We can't win a statewide race if we don't have a rural strategy. So, like I said, we need to be doing that. We have 3 counties that are Democratic and 6 counties on the verge of flipping to be Democratic, and they're flipping to be blue. And that's there's those 6 counties are both urban, suburban, and rural. So we need to be pushing this out so that we can have that rural strategy to do that. But especially as we're looking at the 3 potential candidates here, or 3 past and future candidates here, we've got candidates that had rural parts of their district that we needed to have a rural strategy to win. But there's not one silver bullet to winning. We need to have strong county parties. We need to have a rallying cry of a message. We need to have a fundraising platform that's able to support our Democratic candidates. We need to partner with our allied organizations and start early with candidate recruitment and candidate training. So all of these things have to come together to do this. But before we go any further, because I don't want to have the conversation by myself, I want to introduce and allow these candidates to introduce themselves to say, the districts they ran in, how that race went, and then we'll get into this conversation of how we elect Democrats here in Tennessee. So Glenn, we'll start with you.
Good deal. Thank you. Before I start, let me thank you for putting this together. It was a really great idea. It's a good way to spend a Sunday afternoon. But like you mentioned, my name is Glenn Scruggs. I'm currently the Assistant Chief of Police down here in Chattanooga. And I ran for State Senate in District 10 against Senator Todd Gardenhire. It was my first time running. We had a really good operation in place, had a good game plan. We just fell a little bit short. And like you mentioned earlier when you started out, we probably needed to work stronger, work a little bit more focused on our rural platform. And so going forward, that's what I think Tennessee Democrats in general, are probably going to have to do to gain any kind of success down here. It was a really great experience, and I look forward to giving it another crack sometime in the future.
Great. Thanks, Glenn. Carol?
So my name is Carol Abney, and thanks so much for doing this, Kate. I appreciate you having us talk about this because this is so important. The experience that you get during a campaign, I think, is so important for us to carry forward. And I ran against Kelly Keesland in District 38. It's 5 counties. So Tennessee State District 38 is the largest landmass district in the state of Tennessee, the poorest district in the state of Tennessee, and we've lost 2 hospitals. We actually are on the verge of losing 3 hospitals. We have 1 little hospital in 5 counties. So we knew that it was going to be an uphill battle. We had a great strategy. But the reality is that in my district, where it's almost 30% in poverty, it's just really, really Republican and really difficult to change people's minds. You know, we ran on policy, we ran on hospitals, and that's the whole reason that I got in the race, was because, you know, we deserve to have hospitals in rural Tennessee, and we came up short. But I think the main thing is that we keep trying. So that's the reason I'm so glad that you have me here for this.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you. And so, Jordan?
Thank you, Kate. And thanks, Glenn and Carol, for joining me here on this Sunday afternoon. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for all of us to discuss what we can do going forward. Jordan Huffman. I work in healthcare informatics here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm also a former campaign operative. I say former. I worked in the last election cycle, trying to get out of the campaign cycle a little bit in regards to managing. I've managed several local races across the state, including races in Johnson City and in Nashville. I was born and raised in a rural county in Northeast Tennessee, in Greene County. It's the largest county by land size in the state of Tennessee. And my family has ties going all the way back to the Civil War here in the state of Tennessee. I've been involved in one way or another in politics for the past 16 years. And as I mentioned before, in the 2020 election cycle, I helped my good friend Elizabeth Madeira. I held up her fundraising efforts in the 2020 election cycle. I'm also very active in my local community here in the Hermitage side of Nashville, and am looking to run for Metro Council here in a couple of years.
Keep searching for the mute button. Thank you, Jordan. So I want to ask you all, first of all, because I think a lot of people that are watching are either going, is this the right time for me to run? You know, is this the right issue? What made each of you all want to get into a race, want to run? What issues did you run on, and how did it resonate? And if you're looking to run in the future, what's motivating you to do that as a future look? So Glenn, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I've been a student of politics for a lot of years. Like I'm sure that Carol and Jordan have both been, and I would get tired of coming home from work, after a shift, sitting on the couch and flipping on Fox or CNN or MSNBC, and watching the folks who put in office do things that I know that I didn't agree with, and 90% of my coworkers didn't agree with either. And I work in a place that's pretty Republican, So if they weren't pleasing me with their outputs, and they weren't pleasing my coworkers, my question was, who were these guys working for? Who were they being held accountable to? And so I decided to throw my hat in the ring because I knew that some of the things that they were enacting in Nashville as well as DC, those laws have ripple effects that hit folks on the ground that people in DC and Nashville sometimes didn't get a close-up view on. And so I decided to jump in there, and that was my motivation to sort of run. I ran on some of the issues that you guys have already mentioned. I ran on our healthcare system here in Tennessee, which we all can agree on is horribly lacking as far as Medicaid expansion. I ran on schools because we needed to make sure we fund properly our schools, and because of what I do for a living, I really focused in on criminal justice reform, because I think that there are some things, like I said, that are being put in the law in Nashville as well as in DC that aren't benefiting the common citizen. So that sort of kept me motivated, and it still to this day it's still what motivates me.
And how did that resonate? Like, as you were sharing, talking about these issues in this platform, how did that resonate with your district?
So it went over pretty well. I mean, folks here, most people here send their kids to public schools. We have some great private schools here in my area, but the majority of folks in this area send their kids to public schools. So they were really tuned in to the argument about funding our public schools. The same for Medicaid expansion. Like Carol mentioned, hospitals are shutting down left and right in Tennessee. and it can be put squarely on the shoulders of not funding Medicaid expansion. And so those issues were well received. Of course, with criminal justice reform, because of the George Floyd incident this summer, that was on the forefront of everybody's mind, and it really stuck. So I think our message was spot on. We just need to yank a couple more votes.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And echoing what has been said multiple times before this started and after, like Glenn, everybody here, Glenn and Carol both ran great races. So I want to say that being on top of message, all of, reaching out to the district, to voters, you both did a fantastic job. And Jordan, I know that your work with Elizabeth Madeira and her race and all the other previous campaigns, that's been something that's been a huge party in those campaigns as well. But Carol, can you tell us a little bit about the message, like what motivated you to decide to jump in and run, the messaging, the issues that you were bringing to the forefront and how that resonated in your district?
So in April of 2018, of course, the 2016 election had prompted me to get more involved, as it did a lot of Democrats. I was very, very new. I had only voted in like 3 elections. Like, I'm brand new to politics in 2018. And I know that sounds crazy, but I used to work 12-hour shifts in a factory, and when you're working in a factory, it's difficult to make that connection between how important it is to go vote, and it just seems like it's not going to change your life at all. So that resonates with the people that I know out here in rural Tennessee. Well, when Maria Brewer was calling, there was a big push to recruit candidates in 2018. And so the TNDP asked me to run because I had just gotten my CPA license in 2017. And I was just starting my own CPA firm, and they were like, well, why don't you run? And I knew that the hospital was fixing to close because I was on a workforce development committee, and our county moved all their key people. Well, as a CPA, when a business moves their key people, it's done. Well, they moved their key people in, they asked me to run in April of 2018. They moved some of their key people in May of 2018, and then they closed the hospital. They waited until after the election and closed the hospital in like January of 2019. So we knew it was coming, but when I ran, my message was, we're losing our hospital. Well, everybody thought that it was not true. So even up until the day that they locked the doors of the hospital, people kept saying that I was only saying that because I was running for office. So there was a lot of things that happened. The message did resonate. I drew in some people, but when I ran in 2018 and I lost, as we went into 2020, it was so volatile out here in rural Tennessee that it was harder in 2020 than it was in 2018. So basically, I worked harder in 2020. We called, 30,000 people. We raised $30,000. We talked to every person that we could talk to. I had very limited resources, not bashing anybody, but we didn't have any help. We did it all on our own, me and my campaign manager, Eric Patton. So we had a lot of help out here, but nobody that was really in politics. Gloria Johnson, she's amazing. She helped me a ton, but we just could not sway people. They were not going to vote for a Democrat. With all the federal stuff that was happening, it didn't matter. Like, I had people send me hate mail. Literally, the chair of the Republican Party in my home county sent me hate mail. So it was not going to happen. But we did the best we could. Like Glenn said, we focused on education, poverty, and hospitals. Because, we're Democrats. We focus on the issues. That's what we always do. Toward the end in 2020, I learned that people would ask me about federal issues, and I had to just tell them, you have to make a choice. Are you going to be the moral person and just say what you believe, or are you not going to say? So I made that choice to just be out and tell people what I thought. And, it worked out the way it worked out, but I'm proud of everything that we did, and I maintained my integrity while we were running. So we threw in legalizing weed there towards the end because we're so rural. We have a lot of farmers that would put them to work out here. But, the main things, fully funded public education, lowering the poverty rates, and keeping our hospitals open. But I still think that people are so angry because, we have, as Democrats, we have to come out here and talk to them, because federally, that's the reason people are so angry. Obama did a lot of great things, but a lot of rural people have gotten left behind. So in order to help us, we're going to have to get something federally. So.
Oh, absolutely. And Jordan, what about you as you're looking at running or even just reflecting upon campaigns that you've worked on? What issues would you want to run on or the campaign focused on, and how did it resonate, or how do you imagine it will resonate?
You know, we have a lot in our corner because there's so many issues like Glenn and Carol have mentioned, such as supporting public education and working to expand Medicaid. These aren't things that are minority opinions in Tennessee. This is the majority opinion. We just have a government that doesn't want to hear what the people have to say, you know? And at the end of the day, I do what I do in politics because of the small voices that don't have an opinion or that don't feel like that their opinion can be heard. You know, so many times in this state and all across the country, really, but just in Tennessee, it's just really, really showing its face, is the fact that Republicans just use scare tactics. They know they can't win on the issues. I mean, who could win on their issues? You know, you look at their platform and it's nothing. You know, and I think that'll be a problem for them in the long run. But at the end of the day, what they're selling folks is working, especially in these rural communities. I think that an investment in the rural areas are definitely going to help not only the rural communities, but it's also going to help folks like me in Hermitage, Tennessee, you know, just a suburb of Nashville. It flows up in politics. And while you don't think in a race such as Carroll's, where, you know, just there's a few thousand people voting, you know, not a ton, not as many as in Davidson County, compared to just 8 years ago in that district, there's been a severe drop off in Democratic votes. And that starts adding up across the state. So the state party, more than anything, I feel like, needs to support our rural communities. And I've got some other thoughts too that I definitely want to share, but I'm going to save those for some later questions.
Thanks, Jordan. So one of the things that I've pushed in terms of as part of this 8-point plan that I've had as being running for chair of the Tennessee Democratic Party is having a statewide platform, something that just clearly defines who we are, what we stand for, and that we can use that throughout the year to have messaging, to build a foundation, to be constantly, you know, as county parties are going out and talking to voters throughout the year, having that ongoing messaging. What are your all's thoughts as candidates? Obviously, because a platform's only as good as what we utilize it for. To be going out to do that, would having a platform that we're utilizing be something that your all's thoughts on that of helping your all's race to kind of, you know, if it would, because my thoughts on it is that it would kind of create an inroad to have those conversations, because they're difficult conversations to have, as opposed to some of the feedback I've heard is that the candidates or the volunteers at the door, and that's the first time that voters having that conversation. So let's see. I'm going to start with Carol for this one.
So if I built my own infrastructure myself in 2018. So in 2018, the TNDP did do some things. In 2020, I don't know if they figured out that I didn't need any help or I just didn't get any, but you know, like every race is worth running, but I had no foundation in place. So building my foundation on social media and not getting that nod from somebody else. If you've got a social media infrastructure in place, then you can build somebody else's social media pretty easy. So I had to go out and make my own friends and build my own infrastructure for my campaign. And that took a lot of time and effort. Well, what that did was opened me up for a lot of criticism, and I didn't have time to go out and talk to people the way I should have. I spent a lot of my time, like, you know, fixing mailers and building social media and doing my digital ads and all this stuff. I'm capable of doing all that stuff. But what that did is took me away from what I should have been doing. My main focus should have been out talking to people. When you've got 5 counties, door knocking is a whole different thing. Like it's, like you need to go spend like a couple of weeks in each county every month, or a week in each county every month, and then try to work in another county. It's 65,000 people. I mean, there's a reason that my district is so large. We're so sparsely populated, and the economy is just poor. Like it's just, they say the economy has gotten better now, but we still have 2 distressed counties. We had 3 distressed counties in 2018. So just having that infrastructure would have been huge for me. Like that would have actually let me change some minds. So.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that you're right. A platform or messaging that's better reflects what the needs are of people in Tennessee, that's going to hit home. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, things that impact Tennesseans negatively impact both folks from both parties. And so if we can define ourselves by creating some messaging and creating some a platform that explains who we are and what we stand for, instead of letting the other guys explain who you are and what you stand for, I think you'd be a whole lot further down the road.
So actually,
if you're watching some of this national stuff that's going on now, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Carol.
That's okay. I was just going to say, so actually the Homegrown Democrats from the TNDP Rural Caucus was born out of this idea that we needed some kind of framework to frame our candidates in rural Tennessee and give them a platform so that they wouldn't have to completely build their own platform. Because I had, building all that, it just takes so much time and it takes so much out of you. And I was determined to, I didn't have good numbers in 2018, but I was determined to run again in 2020 because I had spent all my time building and didn't really know what I could do. Of course, COVID kind of messed up a few things, but the Homegrown Democrats from the TNDP Rural Caucus really filled up a gap. That idea was born out of this gap that needed filling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that just really kind of sunk good campaigns like Carol's and Glenn's out there is that the races got too nationalized. And, it really makes our job a lot harder, especially during a pandemic. We can't get out and talk to folks about this stuff, and I really feel like the Republicans took advantage of that. They knew that we weren't going to risk that. And the National Party took a firm stance on canvassing. Would a platform help us? Absolutely. There are things that make us unique here in Tennessee that need to be identified. And we are a big tent party. We've got a lot of views and opinions under our tent. So drafting a platform, it's just something that is far beyond past time doing.
What's funny, Jordan, one of the earliest swipes that sort of came my way in my campaign was that and I was palling around with AOC and Bernie Sanders. And it was funny to me when I heard that, when I saw that little mailer come through. But you're right, people identified us with the national party, with the national campaigns that were going on. And a lot of us took punches for that. You took punches that you didn't really expect. But I think if we do a much better job of, like Kate's saying, defining what we stand for, what we're running on, I think we'd be a lot further off down the road.
Yeah, you're right, Glenn. So in 2010, I managed Representative Eddie Oakley's race. And about in September, I think, we got a mailer delivered to our office, and it had a picture of Eddie Oakley and Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi. And we laughed it off at the time, Yeah. We laughed it off. You would not believe the amount of people in Cobb County that thought that Eddie Oakley was coming around with Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi. Those things work.
And here's the thing, not that would be a negative thing, but the facts that that person wasn't palling around or hanging out with or socially attached to, Nancy Pelosi or President Obama, that's a true thing, and the fact that you can sort of smear someone's intentions by partnering them up with someone that they don't even know. It's a really effective tactic. We got to figure out a way to sort of get around that.
And just to kind of add to that, that I think that if we can find a way to kind of chip away at that national narrative that being a Democrat's bad, that, who we are, and that it's this, Democrats are your neighbors, your coworkers, you sit next to them in the pew at church, that you're grocery shopping with them. If we can have a narrative around that, something we did in Washington County in 2018, so we had I'm voting for Democrats this November because, and the person it would be a Washington County voter that would submit their picture and complete that statement in 2 to 3 sentences. And we ran close to 70 of them, like one a day, going right up to election day. And people got excited because they're seeing their neighbor, their coworker, the person they go to church with, or they see at the grocery store, in this, and they realize this is our community. This is people we know, who are doing this, is chipping away at that mythical, it's that Democrat, and so, oh, that's so and so. I know so and so. It's dispelling that. It's hard to hate somebody you know. And so I think that if we had a statewide effort to coordinate that with county parties to localize it, to help chip away at that national narrative, that would help. What do you all think about that?
I agree.
So
I think you're spot on.
Yeah, I agree too. And I'll tell you something else that talking about rural Tennessee, something that I think is important is, I ran in 2018 as a reaction to what was happening. So some of the people around the state we've talked about, I'm a CPA. I went to school to be a CPA. I had no inkling of ever being in politics or doing anything like that. So if we get people young in the rural counties that want to be involved in politics, I think that would help us tremendously. So, and you've heard it 1,000 times, building that bench. We need to do that. We need local people, and you've done that in Washington County, Kate. Local people with goals that want to be in politics, that have plans to go further, that start out at city council or school board or whatever, and can build that infrastructure and go. Because I didn't. I just jumped in. Like, I had never served. I had volunteered for organizations, but never served in office in my home county. So I think that makes a difference.
And just to add in real quick, there are 15 counties in 2021 that have this year, that have municipal elections. And so please get involved in those races, Sullivan, Hamlin, and Hamilton. I don't know all 15 off the top of my head, I'll admit that, but there's a whole bunch of local races going on. And so even if you don't live in that county and your county doesn't have a local race, call up that county party and ask, what can you do to help? Call up those campaigns, ask what can you do to help volunteer to turn out the vote? Because we have to, Carol's right, this is something I've been saying too, where so many of us have been saying across the state, we have to prioritize building a bench. And so if we don't do that, as we're doing candidate recruitment, it makes it that much harder to identify candidates. And so that way we're helping them get a track record. Heidi Campbell, when she ran, she'd have been an elected official. She had a track record. She had a track record she could run on. So having somebody run for school board, does that. I like to use the phrase of, we have to make local elections sexy again. And it's kind of like, federal elections are sexy because they're all in the news. It's the hype's all around that. And the more local you get, even though the more local impacts you more directly and more often, it's not the headline on the news story. So one thing that you all talked about in terms of it was this, you're having to do everything yourself. And in 2018, we had the coordinated campaign. And so I want to say that I think that there were good and bad things about the coordinated campaign. And so when I talk about a coordinated campaign, I'm not meaning a mirror image of that exact coordinated campaign. I'm talking about that the state party orchestrates with regional field offices that empowers the county parties to support up and down ballot candidates, that has everything from a field program to a data analyst per congressional district to having resources to graphic design artists, to website, to photographers, to all of these resources that candidates need, especially as they're getting off the ground, and we're in short supply across the state looking for staffers. Is that what are your thoughts around enacting something like that to help empower up and down candidates? And Jordan, we'll start with you for that one.
So full disclosure, I used to be the Washington County Party chair about 10 years ago. So I do want to just point that out, because I think that the emphasis of how important county parties are is really understated currently in Democratic politics. These are organizations that really need to be fed by the TNDP to set candidates up to succeed. So local candidates need a few things. So they need a county party that can support them. That's the first thing. And I really, really firmly believe that the TNDP can help facilitate that. They can help facilitate training needs. As Carol mentioned, everything within a campaign, from the field operations to fundraising to campaign management 101, should be tied up in a box with a bow around it and handed to anybody that wants to run for political office in the state of Tennessee. It's just remarkable how we don't do a good job of it here in Tennessee. I'll say that. Money is the name of the game. You can't do anything without money. To not have a program set up that can train candidates to make those calls, to draft out those donor lists, just the basics, is really a room for improvement within the TNDP. I also think that outlining a digital strategy, an effective digital strategy, is something that could be included in that as well. That's something that could be rolled out, once again, just as a template, and could be implemented all across the state. And then finally, I think that the last thing, and this is going off of the last point that we were talking about, is a little bit more on the candidate. You got to be involved in your community. You've got to work hard. You've got to know your neighbors. You have to actually go to things, and you have to listen, and you have to hear what's important to your neighbors. If you can do that, and if you can make a name for yourself locally, if you want to make a change, and if you have a party that can support you, there's no end to what we can do in this state.
Glenn, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, listen to what Jordan said is sort of spot on, because that's a perfect example of what I had. I had support from TNDP. I had support from local politicians in my city and from my county. I had support from all over the place. So even with the defeat that we had in our campaign, I still left that campaign with a really good taste in my mouth, because we had all the advantages that Jordan just described. We just needed to work harder in the county that I don't live in. So you're right. In Bradley County, the swath of Bradley County that was part of District 10, there's room there for a Democrat to work hard, to meet people, to go to functions, to show people what you're about. Because some of these communities are very close communities. They're 3 and 4 generations deep, and you have to know people. You have to get out there and let them know who you are. Not that you're just some guy who's running for office, that they don't know. You have to let people know who you are and what you're about. And with the things that Jordan mentioned, with the infrastructure put in place, you can do wonders in Tennessee. I know in District 10, you definitely can do wonders.
Carol, what about you?
So I agree. What Jordan said is spot on. Like, having the county party and the TNDP support you is, if you don't have it, it's detrimental to your campaign. If you do have it, you can be more successful than you ever think. With that being said, rural Tennessee is kind of a different animal than urban areas, because a lot of people can knock doors in your district and walk your district. It's a few blocks, whereas my district's 5 counties. So you have to kind of have a different strategy when you're talking about reaching voters in rural Tennessee. With that being said, there was a lot of things. When I first ran in 2018, there were things that I was surprised at. The TNDP said that, don't spend your time going to events, go out and knock doors. Well, yeah, that may work in urban areas, but events in rural areas, like, people come out of the woodwork for events. So I thought that was kind of a misstep. Little things like that, it can be tweaked for rural. I think we can have a 95 county strategy and tweak it just a little bit for urban areas and rural areas and suburban areas and be on top of our game. And like Jordan said, there should be a template for that. It should be boxed up with a bow on it and say, you know, here's what we want you to do. And then if your job was to make it better as a candidate, instead of trying to focus on building it to begin with, then you're going to end up with some fantastic candidates and we're going to make larger gains. All races are important. They need to be ran in all areas. We don't have any races that are not important. They are. We need to put up candidates everywhere, and we need to put up good candidates. So I think focusing on that will help us more than anything.
Oh, definitely. Every race, every candidate's an investment. And just to kind of something that I think that I'm going to ask Carol, you know, as we talk about, I know we're talking about like having a more robust digital program. That's one thing that I want to see come in. But I think that especially when we're talking rural, we don't utilize radio as a party. And I know radio is a huge platform to connecting with people, especially voters in rural areas. If the state party had a better, I want to say, messaging that included, you know, as we're thinking through our own earned and paid media, so including radio in that, would that have helped you and even Glenn in Bradley County, like reach out in those parts of your district to reach rural voters?
Absolutely. So I actually used radio. We had a couple of programs. One of them's Coffee Talk in Macon County, where you can go talk to them and they'll run an ad for you for a week. Things like that, like local radio. I used that a lot. I had a lot of people tell me that they heard me on the radio. People called me up and they said, "Oh, I heard you on the radio." And so yes, absolutely. It's the TNDP. One of the things I said, and this is my example. Do y'all remember when Juanita Charles ran for office? Mm-hmm. Like, if I had been the TNDP, that girl would have been attached to my hip. I would have given her every ounce of press that I could have. Every time I talked to somebody, every time I did an interview, every time I was in front of a camera. So I think the TNDP, I think the messaging needs to be there, but they need to have a relationship in place with these people before we start. It's just like having a bench of candidates. They need to have, you know, relationships with press. They need to know who these newspapers are. They need to know who these radio stations are. And if they have that relationship in place to begin with, then we don't have to go out and build the relationship. So yeah, I think, and radio and newspaper is much more important in rural Tennessee. But now digital ads, I don't know anybody out here that doesn't have Facebook much. Like, we have really good broadband in my district. Some districts don't, but we're fortunate. We have Twin Lakes and it's excellent. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, you know, radio is old school, but I love it. You know, it impacts people. People listen to it all day long. You'd be surprised how many folks have that little radio on their desk or on their app on their computer, listen to it as they work at work, you know, as they get their day done at work. I really use the digital platform a lot too, but I really appreciate radio and newspaper. I guess I'm sort of an old school kind of guy. And I think you come across much more authentically when people can hear your voice as it comes out of your mouth on the radio. And, you know, it seems less structured, less scripted. And I think people appreciate that.
Yeah. Jordan, I know you've worked in a lot of rural areas and stuff. How has radio affected those races?
Radio is going to be a very big part of a rural strategy going forward. It has to be. Radio's played into every campaign that I've been involved with, especially those in rural areas. As Glenn mentioned, as Carol mentioned, you go get your car worked on, you know, down the street at Buster's Garage. Guess what? The radio's on. You know, you go to the dentist office, the radio's on in the waiting room. You know, it's just a way of life. It's a part of the culture in these rural areas. And the best part about it, it's cheap and it's easy, you know, so easy to record something like that. And yeah, and did I mention it was cheap?
I'm sorry, did you say it was expensive, Jordan? So let me ask, because I know we've talked a lot also, like we've been talking about county parties and all of that. Can you all talk about the role the county parties played in the races that you've worked on? And I'll just let whoever wants to go first go first.
Yeah, so Rodney Strong was a Hamilton County chair. This was his first turn at bat, and he did a great job. I think because this was his maiden voyage. I think he wanted to really put his all into it, and he did. He helped out all the campaigns that were going on in our city and county, and it was very impactful. He was ever present, and he has a full-time job, but the guy was ever present. So I can't say enough about the impact that a strong party in your county can impact on your campaigns.
Absolutely. Carol?
So a couple of my counties were not organized as of 2018. So that presented a problem. We're very rural out here, but not to say that people in those counties did not help me, but we actually reorganized my home county, Clay County, in, I think it was 2017, maybe it was 2016. It was right after the 2016 election, probably early 2017. So at the time that I agreed to run, I was the chair of the Clay County party. So I kind of had to So we just don't have very many people out here. I mean, it's difficult when the poverty rate's so high for people to volunteer to do work, and I understand that. But with that being said, I had some counties that did amazing work. A lot of people did. There were people in Clay County that helped me mainly with money. They'd come by and give me money. We did a lot of the footwork ourselves. Fentress County was amazing. They did an amazing amount of work for us. And then, of course, we had Scott County. They did a lot of stuff, mainly donations, and they put all my signs up there and took them down every time because, Scott County is in a different time zone and 2 hours away from where I live because my district is so spread out. My district's 4.5 hours across. So it's really a different thing. Macon County, the chair of Macon County, they did an amazing job. Same thing, put out signs, went and got them, did a lot of work. So we had a lot of people working for us,
Yeah. I've been very fortunate to work on campaigns that have had really, really fantastic county party chairs. Back in 2010, when I ran Representative Yoakley's race, the chair in Cott County, who's still the chair in Cott County, Marjorie Ramsey, I couldn't have asked for a better county party chair. That woman would go up if you've ever been in Cott County, it's rural. She would go up the scariest driveways you'd ever imagine. She wasn't scared of nothing. And she was prepared to talk to them about Eddie Yoakley. And, even going to this past year with Elizabeth Madeira's race, Kelly Baker Heffley with the Williamson County Democratic Party was fantastic. We had a good influx of interns from them. They also were able to help us out financially, and that was greatly appreciated, especially considering our opponent, disgraced former Speaker Cassida, had started out with about $370,000 in the bank.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, talking about the money. So my campaign opponent raised like $150,000 in the poorest district in Tennessee, and that's one of the barriers of having somebody run against him is, it's all lobby money. None of it comes from inside this district. So, we raised $30,000, and we were thrilled. We were just over the moon thrilled for 2020 because trying to compete with that money in this poor district that's a whole different thing in itself.
Yeah, finances are a huge barrier. Jordan, I know you were the fundraising director for Elizabeth Madeira's race, and I mean, you've managed lots of races. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we had a pretty interesting scenario in 2020. Elizabeth had never ran for office. She did have a good network to start out with. She had headed up the volunteer efforts for Pete Buttigieg's presidential race. So we were able to start out a little ahead of what the average candidate would. We were able to raise a little over $140,000 for the election cycle, and we had about 2,000 individual donations. And that's in the wealthiest county in Tennessee, in Williamson County. So it is definitely not fair to compare apples to apples from Williamson County to Scott County, because it's just not even close. $30,000 though on the curve, Carol, I think actually gets to $130,000 to Williamson County dollars. So, once again, raising money is it's essential. Mail pieces, the mail pieces that we were talking about earlier that are so effective for Republicans, those things cost money. In that same race that I had highlighted before, the Republicans spent $250,000 just in mail pieces against us in negative ads. And they just had it, and they're always going to have the money. So if we don't have the money to at least make our case to people, then we're starting up with a severe uphill battle.
Mm-hmm. So one thing I want to say is my campaign manager. So I was fortunate. I went out and found friends in 2018, and I met Eric Patton, and he was from Fentress County, but he lives in Nashville. And he was on I believe it was the governor's board for HRC. So he did fundraising for the Human Rights Campaign in Nashville. And I got him to be my campaign manager. Even though he lived in Nashville, like, he was amazing at the fundraising. He really was. He was excellent at that. So he's basically the reason we raised all that money. Because I just told him, I said, I can't raise it here. We're going to have to raise it outside. And his mother still lives in Fentress County, and they don't have a hospital. So that's kind of, but yeah, we did an excellent job fundraising, or he did.
Oh, absolutely. Glenn, can you talk a little bit about the fundraising efforts in your race?
Yeah, I think one thing that helped us out was that I was not afraid to speak to any microphone that popped in front of me, right? And so when folks can feel your authenticity and think that you're speaking to them directly, the money will trickle in. You have to dedicate your time to making the donor calls, which, I probably could have been a whole lot better at, because I did not like it in the front end. I got to be honest about that. That's the hardest thing in the world, to call up, Kate Craig out of nowhere and say, "Hey, Kate, I need $100 from you." That felt foreign to me. That felt really, really foreign to me. But once you sort of get that down and get over that hump, if you put yourself out there and you come across sincere, you can get the money in. You just gotta dedicate your time to doing it. But like Jordan was saying, you cannot run a successful race in 2020 going forward without the dollars, because you need the money for the mailers. You need the money for your digital program. You need your money for your social media ads, and that stuff, it costs dollars. So yeah, I think we had a really good run at it. We stayed really competitive, but without that, I think we'd have had a much harder road to hoe.
Yeah. So it's one of the reasons why, is looking at the Tennessee Democratic Party like this, the overarching organization, and wanting to overhaul the fundraising strategy. I can say, as chair of the Washington County Party, I've never received a phone call to donate to the state party, and you get $0 from the people you don't ask.
Yep.
And so that's an important thing, as we're looking at Kansas, as we're looking at all of that we have to be willing to go out and make the ask, and we have to, and have something that there is a return on investment. There is this is what you're going to get. This is what I'm going to continue showing up. I care about this like you care about this. We're in this together. And so, the state party having the financial means to do the training and the resources and the candidate support to help build up the county parties, do all of that helps, in my opinion, further the candidates getting towards that finish line. And to do that transparently, so that candidates know these are the targeted seats, these are the move the needles, these are we're investing in, and that there's not an unsaid expectation of, well, I just didn't see the party, and so that we know what that looks like.
One thing that made it easier for me, Kate, was that when I called folks and when I spoke to people, about donating to the campaign, I'd be very specific about what I said. I asked people to invest in what our campaign was moving towards. And if you felt the same way about the issues that I felt strongly about, it wasn't just giving me some money, it was investing in that effort. And I think candidates need to be very careful about how they approach those conversations, because if you just cold call someone and say, "Hey, give me $500," that's not gonna cut the mustard, right?
No.
You have to tell people what you believe in, and if they believe in those same things, the checks come a lot easier.
Right.
Glenn, one thing that I found is extremely helpful as well is if you tell folks what you're going to spend the money on. People like to know what their investment's going towards.
Yeah, but you're right, Kate. If you don't call, you don't ask, you don't get it.
Yeah. one of the coolest things that we did is toward the end when we were raising money, we actually paid people that lived here in my district to make calls for my campaign. And we raised a lot of the money outside the district. And we were telling people, it's during COVID, people need jobs, this is what we're paying them. This is why we're doing this. And so we made a ton of calls, but just helping bring that money into people that really needed it in this district that could not draw unemployment, that had lost their jobs, and that helped us a ton. So you're right, Glenn. Telling them what the goal was and what we were doing with it made it a lot easier for people to give. So at least we could do that for a few people here.
Yeah, one thing that was cool, like you said earlier, Carol, when people ask you what you thought about things, tell them, right? I mean, tell them what you think. Yep. People want to know what you think. That pen comes out a whole lot faster when they understand what you think. If they agree with you, I mean, whether they give you 100 or 1,000, folks will support your campaigns.
Yeah. So I decided early on that because you get all these questions and you're like, oh, why am I talking about this? This has nothing to do with schools or hospitals or Medicaid expansion or, poverty. But I decided early on that I wanted to be, like you said, authentic in my campaign. Like I wanted my campaign to be an extension of myself, and all I have to tell you is the truth. So if somebody asks me something, I'll just tell them what I think. And not to say that you can't have a spirited debate, because I'm open to other people's opinions, but at the same time, I'm not trying to hide anything, because when you're running for office and you're asking to represent 65,000 people, you need to tell the truth. And that's how I feel about it. So.
Yeah, there's nowhere to hide. You gotta tell them what you think, right? There's nowhere to hide.
Yeah. So let me ask this question. And if you could, just one thing that you would like to see the Tennessee Democratic Party do in the race going forward, either for if you decide to run again or whoever does run again, what would that one thing be? Because I'm sure we could list either multiple things or something of what we'd like to see different, but what one thing would you like to see the Tennessee Democratic Party do to help the candidate runs in that seat the next time? So Glenn, we'll start with you.
So I think we could do ourselves a really good service by cultivating a really good pool of volunteers. I know a lot of campaigns struggle with having folks go out and door knock, when you can door knock, or make phone calls, or do whatever little chores that campaigns need done. They have a hard time getting volunteers together. So if the TNDP could have a pool, in each county, of volunteers on standby, that'd be crazy helpful, because the legwork is part of the struggle, getting over that hump. So if we could cultivate, a spreadsheet of volunteers in every area, that'd be just great.
Carol, what about you?
So I'm going to go a step further, playing off of what Glenn said. If the question that you had earlier about attacking the rural and urban divide was actually my question, and I did not say attack. And so I don't think that we need to attack any divide. I think that we need to do team building. So we need a good pool of volunteers, but we also need team building sponsored by the TNDP, because we have a very, very large, very diverse tent. And we've got to find a way to bring these people together. And, a lot of the urban people have different ideas than rural people. But if you get those people together, it's like Glenn or Jordan once said earlier, it's hard to criticize people that It's a lot easier to like them and have their back and take up for them if you know them. So I think that we need that pool of volunteers, but I think we need the team building. We need people to understand why there are gun advocates in rural Tennessee, and why there are, people talking about sales tax in urban areas and how much money we get from the federal government. If we bring those people together and mend those fences, then that makes us all stronger, and we will have a better foothold in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah. Jordan, what about you? One thing either for the race that you'd like to run, or the races or the campaigns you've been on?
It would be, well, it's kind of two things, but it's kind of the same thing. And it goes back to training. I think that giving candidates and county parties the resources to ensure that not only do the candidates have everything that they can possibly have at their disposal to ensure that they're successful, but also ensuring that county parties have everything that they need to be successful. And I want to point out one thing because it's a problem. And I'll actually use me and you as an example, Kate. So I was chair of the Washington County Democratic Party in 2011 and 2012. You took over in 2017. There was a gap between us where there was a few chairs. And in between that time, there was a lot of knowledge that got lost. There was a lot of things that just went misplaced. There was a lot of just institutional knowledge that just went out the door, ensuring that when you've got an executive committee member on your local county party, for example, that has to move away, or you have somebody that needs to step down for health reasons, ensuring that someone can step up and fill that position and actually know how to do the job. And I think that is twofold. That's a training thing with the TNDP, but it's also, it would be nice if there was some sort of mentorship program set up to where a successful county party could work with a party that may be struggling, and that's by the positions, that's just by the whole organization, just really depending on what the situation it is. We have to start from square one too often. And we're too far behind right now in the race to do that over and over and over again if we're going to win again.
Absolutely. And actually adding a mentor program is part of the 8-point plan with the training and doing all of that. We have to be doing that because we've got, this coming summer, we're going to have reorganizations for all 95 counties. And so that's an opportunity to onboard new county party leaders to do an intensified and for over a month. Here's how to do fundraising, plan event, utilize social media, candidate recruitment, candidate support. What do you do during the middle of election? Like all of these things. Like how do you do these things? And so how do you file for a primary? Like there's lots of questions that people don't know. And it's also, I want to take a moment to shout out the TDCCA and the handbook that they're getting ready to release to the county parties, because that's going to be a huge resource in doing that. And so, we have to have this training to do that, this mentor program that as new county parties leaders are stepping up to run, that they can be paired with a seasoned county party leader that goes, this is how you do that. And it facilitates collaboration. So absolutely, we need to be doing that. This is a conversation that could go on for hours, but I want to respect everybody's time here and everybody who's watching time. So I don't want anybody to worry that I just said hours and they went, oh my gosh, we've got dinner at some point. But I just want to say that, this has been a fantastic conversation that we've had for the past hour. And thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Jordan, for joining us. Thank you, everybody who's watching from home or going to watch later. Really appreciate that. But my point in saying that this hour it's not a finite conversation. This is an ongoing conversation. As we're looking to flip seats, get out of the superminority, as we're looking to elect a Democratic governor in 2022, a Democratic senator in 2024, as we're looking to, recruit candidates for school board, for city commission, county commissions, all of that's coming up for our 2021 races. And if you know somebody, please ask them to run. If you or yourself are interested, let's talk because we would love to have you serve. It is a wonderful thing to want to step up and serve. And I want to thank everyone who has run. Thank you, everybody who's here joining me today, who's run for office. Thank you for wanting to serve. And I want to ask everybody, so we've got the TNDP Chair's election coming up, and the election is January 16th, and your state EC member is elected to serve you. That is their role, and they're the ones who vote on the next TNDP Chair. So I want to encourage you all to contact your TNDP Executive Committee member. I'm going to put the link here in the comments. There we go. And so so be sure to reach out and let them know, why you'd like them to vote for me as the next chair. If you have questions about my 8-point plan, I'm going to post my website in here too. And please, feel free to contact me, reach out anytime. Would love to talk with you. And I know that all of these candidates would love to, have you all get involved because We can't flip this state. We can't turn it blue. We can't flip seats, and we can't grow our party without each and every single one of us. So we've got to come together, and we've got to do it together. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you everyone for participating in this wonderful, this robust discussion, and we'll catch you all next time.
All right.